Okay, well, first of all, I want to welcome everyone and thank you very much for joining us today. This is the second yortzeit of my father, Alav Shalom, Mr. Albert Allen, and we just came back from the Beit HaChaim, from the cemetery, with a nice group of people. And really, I could speak for the entire time about my father and his fine midot and the many things that myself and so many others are grateful to him for. But we'll save that for another shi'ur. I want to acknowledge my mother, Sarah Allen, who has supported all of us in these various endeavors. And in actuality, I met Rabbi Naor about 30 years ago because my mother and Rabbi Naor's Eshet Chayil, Ruth, were friends. They both spoke French, so I guess that was the connection point. And when I was a young lad of 19, I walked into my kitchen, and there was Rabbi Naor there, and met for the first time. And for me, Rabbi Naor really opened up a world of Torah for me that I was not aware of. I was at the time in Chabad Yeshiva, and but I still like to learn Rabbi Nachman. I like to learn Musar. I like to learn my Sephardic heritage. And Rabbi Naor came and introduced me to Rav Kook and introduced me to a world of Torah which said, you can learn everything. You don't have to pick one. You can learn from everybody. So I'm very grateful to Rabbi Naor for his many teachings. My father, Alav Shalom, was very, very fond of Rabbi Naor. He always showed him great kavod. He showed great kavod to everyone, but especially to Rabbanim. But he always had a special place in his heart for Rabbi Naor. In fact, he sponsored any number of works that we've had the great zechut of publishing. And so we're very, very grateful to you, Rabbi Naor, and your whole family for your tremendous kindness and friendship over the last 30 years, 3 decades. And I told Rabbi Naor at the funeral in New Jersey, I did not see him, so I wasn't able to ask him to speak, but I really wanted him to speak. So Rabbi Naor, this is when we get you for a longer time. And when I had spoken to Rabbi Naor a topic, I asked him, if there was anything that Rav Kook had written about Sephardim and Ashkenazim, knowing that my father started the Sephardic minyan in Englewood, and he said, "Oh, this is something I can work on." So I'm so thrilled that I was able to ask Rabbi Naor to present a shi'ur that he had not done before. So that's also a great zechut. So without further ado, I want to again thank everyone. We're going to have about 30 minutes of a lecture from Rabbi Naor. I'm going to ask everyone to please hold your questions until the Q&A at the end, which I shall administer. And once again, I want to thank everybody. And this is the Yul Nishmat of Imori Avraham ben Salcha Zichrono Levracha. Thank you again, Rabbi Naor. Please teach us.
We always say potrim b'chvod achsanya. So it's a great honor for me to be hosted, and all the Torah that we will learn will be Leilui Nishmat Avraham ben Salcha. The truth is, my connection with the Allen family goes back even beyond what Rabbi Eli said. When I was living in Kiryat Arba, we had a kollel there. It was called Eshel Avraham. And Rabbi Eli's maternal uncle, Rabbi Baruch Levi, was one of the Avrechim in our kollel. So we go back to about 1985. You do your math. That's, what is it, 35 years now? And of course, then in Englewood, I met the Allen family. I met Sarah and Avraham, and their home was really the epitome of Hachnasat Orchim. I would call it Ohel Avraham v'Sarah, this proverbial tent of Abraham and Sarah, which was open on all four sides. That was the beautiful Hachnasat Orchim, and it was also a vehicle for Kiruv, for bringing young Jews, and not so young Jews, closer to their roots, to their heritage. We were coming upon the holiday of Chanukah, and when you study Talmud, Bavli, Masechet Shabbat, there's a whole sugya, my Chanukah. And I want to share with you something that's written there. It's Shabbat of Chaf Gimel Amud Bet, that's 23b. Amar Rava, Derachim Rabbanan, Havule Banin Rabbanan, which means if you love rabbis, and you will have sons who are rabbis. And that was really fulfilled in the case of Avraham Allen, as his son told us, he loved Rabbanim, such respect for Rabbanim, beautiful. And his son went on to become a Rav B'Yisrael. Now, how do we understand that? And I'm going to try to put it into a certain perspective based on the teachings of Rav Tzadok Hakohen. This is in his seminal work, Tzidkat Tzadik, it's Siman Resh Mem Daled. He writes, Habanim ta'alumot lev ha'av, kemo shemati zeh. Whenever Rav Tzadok says Shemati, we know it's something that he received from his Rabbi, the Ishbitzer Rabbi, Rav Mordechai Yosef Leiner, the great Ishbitzer Rebbe. And this is one of these gems that he received from his Rebbe, that the children are the hidden recesses of the heart of the Father. Okay. So this evidently was in your father's heart, and it came out in you, Eliyahu. Now, a couple of lines up on that page, there's another saying, Amar Rav Huna haragil bener havyan le banim talmidei chachamim, which means that if you're careful to observe lighting the candles, now what candles are we talking about? There's two possibilities. Either it's Ner Shabbat or Ner Chanukah, and we'll come to that. But be that as it may, the reward for observing that mitzvah of lighting the candles, Havyan le banim talmidei chachamim, you will have children who are Torah scholars, Torah sages. So how do we understand that? Rashi comments, Banim talmidei chachamim dechtiv. This is a verse in Mishlei, it's Proverbs 6:23, Ki ner mitzvah v'torah or. The commandment is a candle, and the Torah is a light. Says Rashi, Ayadei ner mitzvah, Shabbat v'Chanukah, va or Torah. So if you will observe this commandment of lighting the ner mitzvah, the candle, and Rashi says it goes on both Shabbat and Chanukah, then you will come to or Torah. You will have children who will light up the world with their Torah. Now, speaking of your heritage, which goes back to Bavel, to Iraq, I'm very fond of the Ben Ish Chai. I think you introduced me to the Ben Ish Chai. And in his work, Ben Yehoyada, on that passage, he writes something, and this is meant for Mrs. Sarah Allen. Let me just have a sip of water. This is Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad speaking. First, he wants to clarify, what is it talking about? Is it talking about Shabbat or Chanukah? So he says in our Gemara, it says Ner, which would be Shabbat, the Shabbat candles. He says, if you look in the Ein Yaakov, there it spells out Ner Chanukah. And then he goes on. There's a lot of Kabbalah, which I'm going to bypass. Yulo banim talmidei chachamim, shetismach bahem ha'isha yoter min ha'ish. These children who will be Torah scholars, you know who's going to have even more nachat from them than the father? The mother. Kakatuv beben chacham, and he quotes another verse in Mishlei, in the book of Proverbs. This is Proverbs 23:25. Yismach avicha ve'imecha, v'tarel yoladetecha. Your father and your mother will rejoice, but the one who gives birth to you will be gleeful. Shehosif gila la'em ala simcha. So when it comes to simcha, the father and mother are equal. They're both happy. They have simcha. But the mother has an additional joy, and that's called gila. Shehosif gila la'em al hasimcha. Ma she'en kein ba'av amar simcha bilvad. Aval ha'em simcha v'gila. So that's for you, Mrs. Sarah Allen, that you are having even more joy and happiness from your son, who's Talmid Chacham, and your other wonderful children. The mother, it seems, and you know, the Ben Ish Chai, I'm sure, besides Kabbalah, he knew something about human nature. The mother derives even more satisfaction than the father. So today we're going to be studying an amazing essay that Rav Kook wrote in the year 1920. It's called Li-Shnei Batei Yisrael, to the two houses of Israel. And it was published in a journal, Mizrach Umarav, which means East and West. This was the first volume, maybe the only volume. It appeared in 1920. And luckily for us, it was reprinted in the collection Mamrei Raya. It's volume 1, pages 45 to 48. As some of you may know, I translated it and included it in this collection. I'm holding up the book. I think you can see it, although there may be some glare. Orot is the name of the publisher, along with Kodesh Press. When God Becomes History, Historical Essays of Rabbi Avraham Isaac Hakohen Kook. And as I said, I translated it and I introduced it and I commented on it. What Rav Kook is doing is he's tracing through history the development of two different schools, two different methodologies of studying Talmud, which we refer to as Hakhmei Ashkenaz versus Hakhmei Sefarad. That's the Ashkenazic, call it the German or Franco-German tradition, versus the Sephardic tradition, call it the Spanish-Portuguese tradition. And if you know anything about Rav Kook, you know that he's a great unifier. He's all about unity, achdut. So if he's writing about the two houses of Israel, it's not chas v'chalila to drive a wedge between them, God forbid, but rather to bring the two houses together in a very meaningful and beautiful synthesis in Eretz Yisrael. The essay begins talking about Kodesh versus Chol, which was something that Rav Kook devoted his whole life to, trying to bring together these two worlds of the sacred and the secular. And he says, when it comes to the world of Chol, the secular, I don't think we're going to have any problem unifying Sephardic and Ashkenazic Jews. You know, there was a madman by the name of Adolf Hitler, Yamach Shemo, who branded Albert Einstein's theory of relativity Jewish physics. Well, there is no such thing as Jewish physics. Physics is physics. So Rav Kook's point is, you know, if we want to produce physicists, it doesn't really matter whether you're Sephardic or Ashkenazic. Physics is physics. But when we study Talmud, we're going to discover that we do have two different darkei halimud that have developed over the ages, and we need to bring them together, as I said, to synthesize. And how do we do that? So first of all, he has to delineate what these two traditions are. And it's a whole essay. It goes on for a couple of pages, and in 30 minutes, I'm going to give you the short version. What are some catchphrases? Shnei hakochot, koach habikoret v'koach hapilpul, which I translated into English as two faculties, the critical faculty and the dialectic faculty. I was very tempted to translate pilpul as casuistry, and I would have had some wonderful alliteration, critical faculty versus casuistry, C, critical, casuistry. But, that's really denigrating pilpul. Maybe that's the lowest form of pilpul, where it descends into casuistry. But in its highest form, we'll call it dialectic. So these are the two traditions, as Rav Kook sees it. The Sephardic tradition excelled in what he calls koach habikoret. That's the critical faculty, and we'll explain what that means. And the Ashkenazic tradition is koach hapilpul, dialectic. So, I need water. All right, so you're studying Talmud, the Sea of Talmud, and you've got all kinds of conflicting statements. In this tractate, it says this, and in that tractate, it says that. And you now want to come out to a psak halacha. You want to come out to a practical halachic decision. What do you do? So there's two approaches. The Sephardic approach, and the one who would excel at this, the Rambam, Maimonides, is going to assign values to the various statements, and he's going to have to make a kind of snap judgment that this statement is a tafel. That's not the main statement. This statement is the ikar. This is the pay dirt. I'm going to rule with this statement. And there are klalim, there are klalei psika, there are rules and guidelines, how to assign values to the conflicting statements. So that would be the Sephardic approach, and the master of that tradition is Maimonides. The Ashkenazic approach, pilpul, dialectic, that's the Baalei HaTosafot, the Tosafists, who lived in France, Germany. And the greatest among them was Rabbeinu Tam, Rabbeinu Yaakov of Ramru. In Hebrew, it's spelled with the gimel at the end. In English, it's spelled with PT at the end. We'll just call it Ramru. And if anybody knows Old French, they can correct me. The Ashkenazic approach is, no, I'm not going to discard any of these statements, even the ones that seem to be ancillary. Through pilpul, through some kind of brilliant dialectic, I'm going to figure out a way to reconcile all of these statements. So there's truly no conflict, there's no contradiction. There's a way to reconcile all the conflicting statements. I'm not going to throw away any of them. How did these traditions develop? Well, after the close of the Talmud came the period of the Geonim. In Babylon, you had the great Geonim. There's Rav Hai Gaon, Rav Shira Gaon, Rav Sadia Gaon. And there's a whole Gaonic literature. And what they do is what later Rambam does, okay? They are not interested in pilpul. They don't develop any dialectic. For sure, there's no casuistry. And they make these kind of stab judgments. This is the ikar, this is the main statement, that one is the tafel, goodbye, you're left behind. And that was passed down from Babylonia to Sefarad. it travels westward from Babylonia, Iraq in the east, to the Iberian Peninsula in the west. Where is Rav Kook coming from? That may interest some of you. People always ask me, well, who is Rav Kook's Rabbi? He learned in the Volozhin Yeshiva for a while, not a long time, maybe a year. And his Rabbi was the Rosh Yeshiva. His name was Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, known as the Netziv. And it just so happens that the Netziv, before Rav Kook, dealt with these kinds of historical issues. And he has a brilliant essay. It's called Kidmat HaEmek, which is the introduction to his commentary on She'iltot the Rav Achai Gaon, Hamek Shalah, Kidmat HaEmek. And before Rav Kook, he shows you how the Hakhmei Sefarad, the Sephardic masters, came out of the Gaonic tradition. So that was already done for Rav Kook. He didn't have to do anything there. It was already laid out by his Rabbi. The Baalei HaTosafot, this school of the Tosafos, these French masters, they're biological and spiritual descendants of Rashi. Where are they coming from? That's a very good question. The Netziv and his student, Rav Kook, will tell you they created Yesh Me'ayin. I know only God creates Yesh Me'ayin according to Ramban, but they created out of nothing. Ex nihilo. It didn't come from any tradition. It's something that they, with their genius, developed on their own. This ability of pilpul, dialectic. I must mention, however, that recently Professor Chaim Soloveitchik, who's a great Jewish historian, has written an essay, the third yeshiva of Bavel, where he makes the claim that actually this too came out of Bavel. Now, it's highly imaginative, it's highly controversial. I don't want to go there, but that's what a lot of Jewish historians are discussing these days, the validity of Chaim Soloveitchik's thesis. Is it possible that Rashi is coming out of a third Babylonian yeshiva? Meaning, besides Nahar Da'ah and Surah and Pumbedita, there was a third Babylonian academy that we never heard of, and it's infusing this French Talmudic, the school of Talmud that develops in France. That it too is coming out of Babylonia, but it's kind of far-fetched. Anyway, I want to now address a few points in the essay. I think I pretty much gave you the upshot. Oh, there's one very important point. Rav Kook points out that there are two outliers, two exceptions to the rule, meaning there are two Sephardic rabbis who behave like Ashkenazic. There's a Sephardic rabbi that behaves as an Ashkenazic rabbi, and there's an Ashkenazic rabbi that behaves as a Sephardic rabbi. So the Sephardic rabbi who thinks like an Ashkenazic rabbi is Ramban, Nachmanides. The explanation for that is very simple. You know, people didn't stay in one place, especially if you were young and you were intellectually curious, you moved around, okay? So Ramban didn't stay the whole time in Spain. He actually traveled to France and he studied under Baalei HaTosafot there. And Rabbi Dr. Ephraim Kannefogel has written about that. So he took back to Spain this methodology of the Baalei HaTosafot, of Pilpul, and he authored Chidushei HaRamban, and then his student authored Chidushei HaRashba, and his student authors Chidushei HaRitva. And now in Iberia, in Spain, Ramban and Rashba are living in Barcelona, which today we call Catalonia. They start to write books that are really in the Ashkenazic mold of Balei Tosfot. So that's one exception to the rule, where a Sephardic rabbi who then starts his own intellectual tradition is thinking Ashkenazic, and his opposite number, according to Rav Kook, hold on to your seats, is the Vilna Gaon, the great Gaon of Vilna, Rabbeinu Eliyahu of Vilna, is an Ashkenazic Jew that thinks like a Sephardic Jew. Meaning there's no pilpul, the Gra has no interest in pilpulim, in dialectic. He's interested in Peshat. Whatever he's studying, if he's studying Bible, he wants Pshuto Shemikra. If he's studying Talmud, he wants Talmud Kipshuto. So according to Rav Kook, the Gra, even though he's Ashkenazic, he's living in Vilna, Lithuania, but he's thinking Sephardic. So those are the two notable exceptions. In the introduction, that I wrote, it's a very long introduction, I pointed out other outliers. There's what's known as Iyun HaTunisai. In Tunis, the Chachamim in Tunis developed a unique methodology, Iyun, which was influenced by the Balei Tosfot. So this French school, this French methodology then travels from Paris to Tunis. The one who documented this was the Chida, Chaim Yosef David Azulai. He writes his diary, Ma'agal Tov, and he explains how it came about. He visited Tunis. He was a Shadar from Eretz Yisrael. He visited many communities, and he found it so remarkable that he wrote a whole page how it developed in Tunisia, of all places, this Ashkenazic method of learning. Time is very short. A lot of things I'll have to leave for another occasion. Maybe I'd be at Goel, which hopefully is today. Let me just zero in on a few things. Okay. This is really a chidush of mine more than of Rav Kook, but one of the issues that Rav Kook touches on is the attitude towards philosophy. Rashi, Balei Tosfot, these Franco-German Jews, don't really have any truck with philosophy. It's alien. Lo yavo bikal Hashem. It doesn't enter into the Bet Midrash at all, honestly. In Sefarad, in Iberia, in Spain, well, we all know Maimonides wrote Guide of the Perplexed, but not only Maimonides, they're all busy with philosophy. Even the Rashba, who issued a cherem not to study philosophy under age 25, but he writes that he himself studied philosophy. They all studied philosophy. Ramban, Rashba. And Rav Kook is wondering why that is, why they develop different postures towards Greek philosophy. I want to say something at this point, and I might have to end on this note because the time is short. It seems to me that we are indebted to the Greeks for the taxonomy, the Sidur or the Koach HaSidur that you find in the Mishnah and also in Mishneh Torah. And let me unpack that a little. A week ago, we read Parshat Toldot, and Rivka Imenu is promised Shnei Goyim bevitnech. There are two nations in your womb. And in Masechet Avodah Zarah, Daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, quoted by Rashi on the spot, Elu Antoninus veRebbi. Who are these two nations? One is the Roman prelate or governor, whatever his title was, Antoninus, and the other is his opposite number, Rebbe, which is shorthand for Rabbi Judah the Prince, Rabbi Yudah Nasi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh. They both lived in Tiberias. Scholars to this day are trying to figure out the identity of Antoninus with little success. And these two men had a great love for one another. So there's not only du-kiyum, there's also a du-siyah. There's not only a peaceful coexistence, but there's also, I believe, an ongoing intellectual dialogue between them. And Rabbi Judah the Prince edits the Mishnah. And it's organized in a fashion which Jews never had before. In Tanakh, we don't have such books. We don't have this kind of taxonomy. I believe it was under Greco-Roman influence. Now I'm going to skip to Rambam. Rambam says, I'm writing Mishneh Torah, a code of Jewish law, and I'm fashioning it after the Mishnah. It's going to be in the language of the Mishnah. And here too, there's this amazing ability to organize material in a logical, coherent presentation, that this, I call it taxonomy, this koach hasidur. Where's it coming from? It's not Jewish, it's Greek. Rambam was, as we know, was conversant with Aristotle. When you study Aristotle's books, whatever he's writing about, you see this kind of organization, this kind of logical presentation. Now, wedged in between Rabbi Judah the Prince and the Rambam, as we said, you have this Kufat HaGeonim, the period of the Geonim in Babylonia. And they're writing in Judeo-Arabic. And some of them, and probably the most notable in this respect, is Rashbach Gaon. That's Rabbeinu Shmuel ben Chofni Gaon, who is the last Gaon of Surah. And he writes these works, which are very logical. There's a scholar by the name of David Eric Sklar, who has written a whole book on Samuel ben Chofni Gaon. He shows how he was influenced by Muslim jurisprudence. And he, in turn, Samuel ben Chofni Gaon, so Sklar believes, influences Maimonides. But where did the Muslim jurists get it from? It came out of this Greek tradition, which had been translated into Arabic. So you might say, well, this is total apikorsut, Rabbi Naor, B'mchilak kvod Toratcha. I've never heard such heretical thoughts in all my days that Rabbi Yudah Nasi got the organizational ability, the authorial ability from Antoninus, and that Rashbach got it from Muslim jurisprudence, and that Rambam gets it from Rashbach. So hopefully you've studied Masechet Megillah. And in Megillah, there's a Mishnah by Rashbag Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Af, B'sfarim lo hitiru sheyikatvu el Yvanit. A Sefer Torah can be written in only one other script besides the sacred tongue, and that's Greek. And then the Gemara, this is Megillah Daf Tet Amud Bet, Halacha Kerashbag, that's the halacha. You'll find it in Rambam. My Tamei de Rashbag. Why did he hold that you could write the Torah in Greek? Amakra, because the verse says, Yafdalu liyefet vishkon be'ohalei Shem. Yafuto shel yefet yehe be'ohalei Shem. Rashi says, Yafuto shel yefet hu lashon yavan. Lashono yafeh, or yafa, mishel kol b'nei yefet. So Chazal, the great Torah sages, had no problem in appropriating the best elements of Greek civilization. If it's the script, what I'm saying is not so different. I believe that what we appropriated from the Greek tradition was not only linguistics, but also architectonic, taxonomy, the ability to create a well-organized book, whether it's the Mishnah or Mishneh Torah. And Rabbi Eli, can I just say something else for 2 minutes before we go to Q&A?
Rabbi Naor, I don't have a time limit, so you can speak for as long as you'd like.
I love that, man. Okay. This is a nice sefer, if you can get a hold of it. It's called Morot Haraya Chanukah, made Rabbi Avraham Yitzhak Hakohen Kook. Anyway, these authors or editors have compiled all of Rav Kook's writings that touch somehow on Chanukah. So it's a timely topic. And if you open up to page 82, it's a very short reverie of Rav Kook. I believe these things came to him Beruach HaKodesh, for lack of any better term. It's something that just popped into his consciousness. The Shalah, Shnei Luchot Apri, Rav Shai Levi Horvitz points out that Chanukah, we're always reading in the Torah the story of Yosef and his brothers. Those two coincide. So you've got a conflict between Yosef and Judah, Joseph and Judah. And what came to Rav Kook in some kind of reverie, Ruach HaKodesh, whatever you want to call it, was the following. We have 4 methods of studying Torah: Pardes, Pshat, Remez, Drush, Sod. There's 4 ways, 4 methods. There's Pshutot Shemikra, the simple approach. At the top of the ladder, the Sod, which is the esoteric, the mystical. And in between, there's Remez and Drush, which are homiletics and dialectics and all kinds of good stuff in there. According to Rav Kook, the 4 are divided into 2. Yosef got 2 and Judah got 2. Yosef got the Ktonet Pasim. He got the, in English, called the coat of many colors, but the Hebrew word is pas. Pas is Rashi Tevot, Pshat, Sod. So Yosef was a fellow, when he would study Torah, he's focused on 2 things. The entry level, Pshuto Shemikra, the simple meaning, and at the other end, at the top end, the Sod. And according to Vilna Gaon, those 2 meet. The simplest level and the deepest, most esoteric level hook up. They bypass what's in the middle, and that's what Judah got. The tribe of Judah. And here Rav Kook quotes a pasuk. Probably most of us never heard this pasuk. It's a verse in Hosea 12:1, and it reads, Svavoni bekachash Ephraim u'b'mirma bet Yisrael v'Yehuda od rad im el v'im kedoshim neman. The key words are v'Yehuda od rad. Rad. Oh, so it's the prophet Hosea is contrasting the northern tribes of Ephraim, who have gone astray, and the tribe of Judah, the kingdom of Judah in the south, who remain faithful to God. And the key word is Rad. And Rad, says Rav Kook, is initials Remez Drush. And that's what Yudah was focused on, Remez Drush. So it's something I'm sharing with you. You can go for walks with it, go for strolls in the forest with it. I've thought about it for years already. And I believe that somehow this is what I call like a pre-adumbration of what comes later in Hakhmei Sefarad versus Hakhmei Ashkenaz, where not only the Vilna Gaon is thinking Sephardic, but Rav Kook, who views himself as the Hamshech, as the continuation of the Bet Midrasho Shel Agra, he's also thinking Sephardic. And how do I know that? There was a great teacher of Torah in the 20th century. His name was Reb Shimon Shkop, Reb Shimon Yehuda Hakohen Shkop. And he very much wanted to become the Rosh Yeshiva Merkaz Rav. And he got Rav Mishkovsky to intervene on his behalf and Rav Chalap. And the answer came back, no. I'm very sorry, said Rav Kook. You cannot be the Rosh Yeshiva of my yeshiva. Because this yeshiva is going to be predicated on the tradition of learning of the Vilna Gaon, which is, as we said, it's all about pshat. I don't want pilpulim here. I don't want this kind of dialectic and casuistry. My bani, my talmidim will adhere to this line of the Vilna Gaon. But this is the Vilna Gaon, this belief that these two, the pshat, the entry level, the simple meaning, and the sod at the top, call it Kabbalah, Chochmat and Nisar, those two link. And that's the Sephardic tradition, the Ashkenazi, and that's Yosef. And the Ashkenazic tradition is Yudah, which is beautiful. They're both beautiful traditions. And in there you have Remez and Drush and Pilpul, and it's wonderful. But said Rav Kook, that's not what my yeshiva is going to be founded on. So I love you very much. He knew Rav Shimon Shkop. He loved him very much. He said, you cannot be the Rosh Yeshiva here. I don't want you introducing your kind of pilpul into my yeshiva. So I think I'm going to leave on that note. I probably alienated everybody by now. Shalom Yisrael. Okay, we need Rabbi Eli to come back.
Okay. So we have, first, thank you so much, Rabbi Naor, beautiful. Just for starters, we have my dear friend and colleague, Rav Shimon Berman from Yeshiva Torah V'Avoda, who wanted to ask a question. Rav Shimon, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. So my question goes back. Thank you very much, both Rav Eli Allen and Rav Naor. Very much enjoyed this year so far. And my question goes
so far. So far.
Hopefully it'll continue. Hopefully it's not over yet. And the question comes back to the discussion about Pilpul and the derech of the Balei Tosafot. That you said that the Sephardi approach is much more of the derech of the Gaonim, while the Tosafists seem to have invented their own new approach to learning. And my only question is, it seems that the derech of the Gemara itself is to use that same style of comparing sources and having incredible creative ukimtot and new ways of explaining the Mishnah, which is so far beyond the pshat of the Mishnah. It seems a lot more that the Ashkenazim are continuing the Gemara almost.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I hear you. I'm certainly not going to contradict what you said. The question is, what happens after Chatimat Talmud? After the closure of the Talmud and in the period of the Gaonim, we're not finding those ukimtot anymore. there's some kind of shift of consciousness, and the Hakhmei Sefarad are continuing that, as the Netziv and Rav Kook pointed out. By the way, Chaim Soloveitchik, who was a great Jewish historian, don't get me wrong, I wonder if he's aware that his ancestor, the Netziv of Volozhin, didn't think that Balei Tosfot had come from Bavel, that there's some kind of third yeshiva of Bavel. He saw that they had created something, as I said, ab Dovon. Yishmei Ayin, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, do we have another question?
I have a question comment. Yirmiyahu Lukens. Rabbi Naor, do you think that the difference that one sees in the Spanish Sephardi, how the Rishonim, in terms of their attitude to minhag, for instance, making kaparot asur, or frowning very strongly upon tashlich, as where they saw a minhag growing and they felt that it might or would or actually was counter to halacha, they squelched it. Well, it seems that in the Ashkenazi world, perhaps seen the most in the Hasidic world, which there's this constant accretion of minhag, where one is different views, different takes on how one dresses and talks, etc. They all seem to pile up on top of each other, and there's a reluctance to make any decision about which to do. So we do them all, and we have this immense collection of Ashkenazi minhagim and different communities then being very, very different. Do you think that may be a reflection? Firstly, do you think I'm right about the minhagim, and do you think that a reflection of the difference in the approach to learning?
All right. So first of all, a disclaimer: I'm not a Jewish historian, but three things I'd like to say. First of all, this wonderful saying that minhag otiot gehinom is from Rabbeinu Tam. Okay, the one who said that, a custom, if it's a minhag shtut, a minhag borut, is gehinom, it's hell. Okay, that was Rabbeinu Tam. Talking about tashlich and kaparot, the Vilna Gaon was opposed to that, which might make it Sephardic in yet another way. I know people are going to love how I've Sephardized the Vilna Gaon. But the man who wrote a great book, honestly, on minhagim, it's called Minhago Shel Olam, is Eric Zimmer, Yitzhak Zimmer. It's really a must-read. I remember him as a Rav in Washington Heights when I was a boy growing up there, but he went on to greatness in Eretz Yisrael. So Yitzhak or Eric Zimmer, it's a whole book, Minhago Shel Olam, and maybe you'll find there some answers.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Rabbeinu Yitzhak.
Can I just ask a shalom alecha, Kvod Harav? It's so wonderful to have you in my living room. My question,
even if it's only Zoom, even if it's only virtual reality.
Better than. So my question is this: is it true that generally the Ashkenazi approach tends more to Chumrah?
In today's day and age, everyone.
But that's the second part of my question. That's the second part of my question.
Yeah.
Is the Sephardi world sort of, bow down is not the right word, but they've adopted the Ashkenazi approach.
But before I forget, I want to share with you a quip I heard many years ago from Professor Binyamin Shalom, who wrote a book on Rav Kook, as you know. And he turned to me one day and he said, Hayom kulanu haredim. I looked at him, what does that mean? He says, kulanu meleim harada. We're all full of anxiety, So today, everybody, we're all haredim, we're all anxiety ridden, and we're seizing chumrah, gabei chumrah. I don't know that it's a peculiarly Ashkenazic thing. I think it in any age of crisis, people become insecure, and they need all kinds of chumrot. There's also what's known as OCD.
But you see, I see the chumrah thing as a type of. There's such a
OCD is obsessional compulsive disorder. Yeah. Right.
But in a certain way, there's such a freedom of religion now. Here in Israel, every type of group that wants to do its thing is given complete freedom, and it's sort of because of that great freedom and not having to deal with so many other things that they almost can just. Chumrah has become like a synonym for holiness. And so they want to be holy, and this has somehow become attached, this concept that this is the path, this is really the holier path. Is that reflective of reality?
Reflective of reality, yeah. Well, if our, we live in a time of crisis. We had here an MD that was speaking to us about Corona and the second wave, and So, we had Aliyah Rishonah, then there's Aliyah Shniya, now they're talking about Aliyah Shlishit. I really don't know how to respond. I think that these things are cyclical. There are times of Chumrah, there are times of Kula, some poskim are more Mekel, some are more Mahmir. By the way, one of the things that has been pointed out in the literature, and there's so much literature about Rav Kook these days, is that he was not a great Mekel. Everybody knows about his Heter Mechira when it comes to the Shnata Shemitah, the sabbatical year, that he, came out with the Heter Mechira. But other than that, and believe me, he was filled with anxiety when he did that. He was not known as a great Mekel, his Bet Din was not what we call the Bet Din Sharia. He was not a very lenient adjudicator of Jewish law. And I can prove this on many different issues when it came to milking on Shabbat. Rabbi Zalman Meltzer was more Mekel than Rav Kook. So somehow he got branded as a Mekel, in some camps as a Kal, but he was not. He actually, if you study his Shelot Shuvot, many times he's very Mahmir.
But in Le Nevuchei Hador, he speaks about the return to Israel actually gives us the possibility to relax. And he says that specifically, like directly, that attitude, well, it's true that you're saying, I think there was a sesame oil that he was also Mekel on.
Shem Shel Shum Shemim for Pesach, yeah, Achim Breslavi and Yafo, yeah. I had in my possession a letter that he wrote to the Bet Din Shel Hasidim in Yerushalayim. The Rosh Bet Din was Reb Libman David Shuvaks. He was Mekel there. That it was a sesame oil, a special run for Pesach that he allowed. But look, there were great grounds for allowing that. That's a very complex issue. But in general, he was not a Mekel.
But I think he spoke about a future where we would relax a lot of the chumras, a lot of the gzerot and takanot. He says that specifically in Le Nevuchei Hador. And I think there's lots of reasons why they didn't publish L'Nivuchei Ador, and this being one of them.
Yeah, well, we are Nivuchei Hador, so I guess it's timely. Okay, so Rabbi Eli, do you want to continue Q&A or shut it down, or what do you want to do?
I think we have time for one last question.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody has one, but we have time for that question.
Rabbi Monk, do you want to chime in? Okay, we can't hear you. You have to unmute.
Thank you very much for your shi'ur, Bezalel.
Well,
I enjoyed it.
Thank you for your attendance. Kavod
Thank
gadol.
you. Thank you.
You know, maybe I'll just share one last thing that I saw Shabbat from Rabbi Nachman Mibraslav, Likutei Moharan. And it gives a totally different perspective on all of this, as only Rabbi Nachman can. This is in Likutei Moharan, Kama Siman Nun Vav, 56. That Torah is called Ubiyom HaBikurim, and this is Sa'if Tet, paragraph 9. And this is what he writes. You won't find this anywhere else. Be'emet elu ve'elu divrei Elohim Chayim. Eruvin Yud Gimel Bet. These and those are the words of the living God. In other words, if it's a true machloket l'shem shemayim, like Shammai, Hillel, then they're both right. Okay, they're both the words of the living God. Uma she'ein halacha kemoto. So why isn't the halacha like that one, like Shammai, let's say? Ze yefshar lanu lahavinu hasig. That's beyond mortal apprehension, beyond mortal ken. No human being can understand that. Rabbi Nachman doesn't say this, but I'm throwing it out. Maybe that's why you needed a bat kol. It was decided by heaven. These are the mysterious ways of God that we cannot understand. Hainu bechinat tzaddik v'tovlo, tzaddik v'ralo. Sometimes there's a tzaddik who has it good, and sometimes there's a tzaddik that has it bad. You know, why do bad things happen to good people? Shafilu Moshe Rabbeinu lo hisig zot. Even Moshe, the great Moses, our teacher, could not understand this. Val ze bikesh, Shmot Lamed Gimel, hodi'eni na drachecha. God, please enlighten me. Teach me your ways. So that's the famous Gemara Brachot of Zayin Amud Aleph that Rabbi Nachman is quoting, but he put a spin on it. Ki tzadik v'tovlo. What does it mean, tzadik v'tovlo? Tzadik who has it good. Ze bechinat tzadik shalacha kmoto. It's a tzadik that the halacha has decided in his favor. Tzadik v'ralo, ze bechinat tzadik she'en halacha kmoto. Tzadik who doesn't have it good is a tzadik who has been decided against, such as Shammai. So Hillel's a tzadik v'tovlo and Shammai is a tzadik v'ralo. Bafilo Moshe lo hisig zot, kihem bechinat darkeshem. Even Moses, the great Moses, could not apprehend this because these are the mysterious ways of God. Now, one of the things that Rav Kook wrote in the essay was that the Hakhmei Sefarad could always fall back on klalim. They had, you know, there's a whole sefer, Yad Malachi, which is full of klalei psika, how to paskin, you know, there's all kinds of klalim. Rabbi Yudah, Rabbi Yossi, halachak Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish, the halachas like Rabbi Yochanan, except for 3 cases like Reish Lakish, and then by Avraham there's Yal Kagam, and there's all kinds of klalim. Says Rabbi Nachman, ultimately, this is from God. Why the halacha is decided like one chacham and not like the other? Even Moshe Rabbeinu could not understand that. So. Good luck with your klalim, but at the end of the day, there's this, you know, God is deciding. The halacha is decided by God. And I know it contravenes lo b'shamayim hi and lo mashkechina bevat kol and all that, but I thought I would share this with you. I was, as I was preparing this shi'ur, Shabbat, I use Likutei Moran as an oracle, basically. I opened up and I'm like, wow, this is such a fresh perspective on the whole thing that it's not even based on reason. Ultimately, the halacha, these are the Darkei Hashem Hanistarot. These are mysterious ways of God. So I guess what do we wish each other? A liftiga Hanukkah, Chagurim Sameach. And your father should have a liftiga Gan Eden.
Amen. I want to thank you, Rabbi Naor, for your beautiful words and the wonderful Torah. Hashem should bless you and your family. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. Bezrat Hashem, I'm going to put this up on Facebook and YouTube if anyone missed part of it or if you'd like to send it to somebody else. And again, I want to thank everyone for joining in my father's memory. And much hatzlacha and Shavua Tov to everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Zaku Baruch.
Rivki.
Yeah.
Yeher zichro baruch.
Rivki's my daughter.
Thank you.
And
all right. Thank you again to everyone and lots of hatzlacha. Be well.
Thank you so much, everyone. Good to see you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Rabbi Naor.
Shalom.
Shalom.